Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we're going to check out a pretty nice high-end folder from Reate. This is the Reate Wave. Now this came out a couple of years ago, and at the time it was really popular. A lot of people liked it, and it still is a popular model, but not widely available. So you don't see a lot of these floating around out there. So it's really nice. Actually, I'm pretty happy to be able to check this out and share it with you. If you really want one, I think if you watch the secondary market, you do see them from time to time. Now, for me, this is just a little smaller, and this is honestly right on the borderline. I mean, it's not, this is not a knife that I would say, it's too small, just forget it. But it's not a knife that I'm going to spend my own money on because I would want it to be just a little larger. And we'll see that when we get to some comparisons. I've got quite a number of comparisons for you because this kind of falls in a category where there's a lot of places you can go if you really like this knife. So I'll try to share a few different things with you when we get to that point in the video. Let's go ahead though and get started with size and weight. Then we'll talk about the blade, the action, the handle, the way that we normally do. So size on this guy is 7 11/16 overall. We've got just under 3 3/8 inches on the blade length. And that kind of gives it away. I prefer a 3.5 inch blade or more. And this guy doesn't quite get there, but it's close. So this is almost to where I want it to be. The handle length here is 4 3/8 inches. So that's the closed length. And this guy weighs in at a very comfortable 3.8 ounces, which honestly, I have no problem at all. In terms of carrying this all the time as an EDC, I think this is a great high-end carry. It carries very easily. It's light enough that very, very few times are you going to feel like it's too heavy, and those are only going to be those exceptional circumstances when you're wearing, I don't know, a pair of gym shorts or something like that. Otherwise, I think this is a great weight and a great size for constant carry. Really, really nicely done. Let's go ahead though and take a look at this blade. This is one of the things I really like about this knife. We have an M390 blade with a stonewash finish, drop point, full flat grind. We've got that, hold on, let me get it to focus here. We've got a fairly thick blade stock. And one of the things I do appreciate about this is they've done a pretty good job balancing out the thickness of this blade while still getting it fairly thin behind the edge, giving this knife a lot of utility. This is going to slice really, really well, but they haven't just gone wild and created such a thin, slim blade that you feel, I don't know, like you might break it or something. It's robust enough while still being very, very versatile and very slicey. So I really, really like this blade. Of course, M390 is going to be a total win. You guys know I do mildly prefer, and this is a fairly light stonewash, but I do like a satin finish a little bit more. But honestly, I think in this design overall, it does fit pretty well. Action on this guy is fairly typical Reate action, okay? It will drop shut. It doesn't drop shut as easily as some knives, largely because that blade is quite light and because the lock bar, so notice it drops when I release the lock bar tension fully, but that lock bar does put a little bit of tension on the blade so that it doesn't maybe drop as easily as some knives. And that's largely though, because of the fact that that's not a huge amount of steel there. So you don't have the weight pushing that down. In terms of deployment, the detent is really, really nicely set. You've got a stainless steel lock bar insert there for longevity, which is nice. And one of the things I want you to see here, we could almost talk about this under construction, but we're going to cover it now, is the way this inlay kind of covers part of the lock bar and provides that over travel stop. So I really, really like the way that they've kind of cut out to include that inlay over the lock bar. Really, really nicely done. The other thing I like about that is it gives consistency to the knife. I would really, I don't know, it would feel to me like the knife wasn't well balanced if you had the inlay on this side and then they just forego it completely on this side. So I like the fact that they allowed for, that consistency of the mirrored inlay on both sides. As you can see, the action on it is very nice. You do have the Torx bit there for adjustment. It is, of course, a ball bearing pivot, which we're pretty used to seeing from Reate. And again, like most Reate knives, the action feels really, really satisfying and really, really just nice. All right, so Moving on from the action, which I think is very good. It is a flipper only, by the way, in case you didn't catch that. I mean, it's pretty hard to miss, but I guess I ought to mention it. Let's move on and talk about the handle. Now, this handle is one of the areas we want to pay a little more attention. And this is one of the places that Reate Knives really, really shines. And here's what I think they do possibly better than anybody else. I mean, I guess that's an overstatement a little, but Reate knives, I find, tend to have some really nice details. I love the mill lines here. I love the decorative, anodized pivot screw. The inlay here is really nicely done with this checkered pattern, and they've even done the contrasting colors with the gold all the way around, the silver in the middle, and then the blue. So they've done a lot of really nice detail work here. And yet, when you put the knife down and look at it as an overall package, it doesn't look over the top. It doesn't look, silly. It's still very sort of classy and simple. And that's a really hard balance to strike, but I find Reate does it perhaps more than most other companies. Now, they don't do it in every model. They've got a couple of misses, I feel like, but certainly this one, they seem to have done a really nice job of giving a lot of detail and a lot of visual interest while still providing a pretty simple, straightforward design. In terms of construction, it's done with a backspacer and your two titanium slabs here, overlay on both sides, which I do really like. You can see the lanyard hole is integrated into the backspacer, and you've got that single position clip. That works pretty well. It's not the best clip ever, but I honestly, this goes in and out of pocket just fine in my experience. So can't really complain too much about that. What about comfort in hand? Of course, that's one of the big things here. This is a smaller knife, and sometimes smaller knives struggle in this department, but I think this one is pretty nicely done. It feels really good. There's no hot spots. There's no jimping of any kind, which is not... the choil is deep enough that I don't feel insecure, and the checkering on the inlays there do give me a nice bit of traction, but it wouldn't hurt, I don't think, to put a little bit of jimping on the back of the blade here. Otherwise, though, the knife is very, very comfortable. You can see I do get a full grip on this knife, and this is another knife that I have forgotten to measure the grip area. So let me reach over and just grab a ruler here and give you a quick number on that. So we're getting almost, really it's more like 3 5/8 because you're not going to put your finger way back here. So you get about 3 5/8 inches of grip area, which for me with my large size hands works okay. If you had extra large hands, this might be a little small for you to get a full 4-finger grip on, and it may not feel as nice or as useful as it does for me. So that's the ergonomics. I think the ergonomics are fine. It's not like the most, hand-fitting knife I've ever felt or anything like that, but I certainly have no complaints or no discomforts. All right, let me grab a couple of other Reate knives. First off, this, of course, is my favorite Reate. It's actually one of my favorite high-end knives in general. I love the Torrent. It's just... Again, it has that same, it's interesting and detailed, and it's got some cool pieces on it, some really nice details, but it still maintains a level of simplicity and just a very, very classy knife as far as I'm concerned. So in that sense, these are very similar. I actually find the detent and the action to be just a tad nicer on the Torrent than I do on this, but both are very, very good. And really, we come to expect that at this point from Reate. The other knife I've got to compare here is more because of the milling that's been done. This, of course, is the Todd Begg Steelcraft Bodega, which I do absolutely love. The reason I brought this out is because of the similarity in the checkering here. And again, although this one is a little more over the top than what Reate's in-house designs normally are, I do find, there's kind of a bit of a connection there. So I wanted to share this one with you. And of course, again, the quality level here and just the fit and finish and the attention to detail is phenomenal, as we have pretty well come to expect from Reate. And you go, okay, Kevin, what about some other options? Well, Whenever I'm looking at a titanium frame lock, I like to at least bring the Inkosi into the picture just because people are very, very familiar with it. This does also kind of give away my issue with the size. This is the size of knife I really, really like to carry. And so you can see this is just a little bit too small for me. And at the price point, you know, I'm not going to make sacrifices. Let's see. Going to some sort of more budget-ish options, if you will. There we go with the zero tolerance 0393. I really, you know, actually, I can see both of these being appealing to the same person because they're highly useful knives, but still they've got a bit of that extra design flair, if you will. Let's see, let's grab a couple of Kaisers as well. This one's a little closer in size. You're still getting more blade length. That's one of the things I love about the Kaiser Corto is the blade length for the size and weight of it is absolutely phenomenal. One more Kaiser here. That would be the Uprising. And guys, you will notice, I'm not going to try to claim that Kaiser is getting things to the same level of quality, the same fit and finish, the same smoothness, those kind of things. It's not, okay? But it's a pretty good option if you don't want to drop the kind of funds needed for this, but you still want a pretty darn good titanium frame lock, especially if you watch my Kaiser video from a couple of days ago where I talked about the fact that there are some really, really good deals to be had. A knife that I find very similar in sort of size, in function, is the Steel Will Gecko in the Mini. They're almost the exact same size. They have a very similar blade profile, especially in terms of the cutting edge, very similar feel in hand. This guy's a little bit cheaper, but they're both pretty high-end folders. And so if you really like this, I would suspect this would be another knife you may want to look at, or maybe you already have it. And that should give you an idea about size. Like always, we want to bring in a pair of two just because everyone is familiar with it and it does give people a good sense for the overall size. And since this is my channel, we should bring in one more heavy duty high-end folder, and that will be the Cold Steel Formax. So there are my comparisons for you. I've tried to give you a fairly wide level of diversity, and hopefully there's some things there that are of interest to you. In terms of my overall take on this particular knife, I've got to say it's a little small for what I want. However, if I liked knives of this size like many of you do, I would be really, really impressed with this. And if this was a little bigger, I would absolutely own one. I love the overall design. I think it's a great combination of, you know, some complex detail and some visual interest while still being simple and useful. I think the quality is absolutely right up there, and the utility is absolutely off the charts with the M390 steel in a full flat grind. This is going to be a great cutting blade. So overall, do I recommend this knife? Absolutely, I recommend it. I don't find any big issue with it. Really, the only thing that you could complain about, as far as I can tell, is the size. And for a lot of you, that size is going to be perfect, even better than, you know, my favorite Reate knife, the Torrent. So there you go. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.